Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Man, I am so excited to be here with you all tonight and present this portion of our Men's Health Summit, blackdoctor.org's Men's Health Summit, liver disease. It's not all about the alcohol. So, we've got some amazing panelists that are on tonight's show. Without further ado, we want to introduce Dr. Lewis Roberts, who is a gastroenterologist at Mayo Clinic. Also, Dr. Nathan Furukawa, who is the Senior Advisor for Hepatitis at the CDC. Let's go ahead and welcome everyone. So, as you're coming in all over Facebook, please just hit up the chat. Let us know where you're watching from. Let us know, hey, if you deal with this disease, if you know somebody dealing with this, because we've got a power packed information for you to share with your family and friends tonight. So, welcome, Dr. Roberts. Welcome, Dr. Furukawa. How are you guys doing this evening?
Doing well,
Doing
thank you.
great, doing great.
Good. Well, we've got a lot to talk about tonight. We know that liver disease over indexes in the Black community, but why is that? First of all, let's see. Can you explain what liver disease is and what different types are out there? I'll let anyone go ahead and answer this question first.
Well, maybe I can start, and hopefully Dr. Furukawa can add some
Yes.
additional context as well. So first of all, what's your liver? Because sometimes that's a question that we get, and we hear a lot about the heart. People know where their heart is. People know where their lungs is, but sometimes people aren't quite sure where their liver is.
Mm-hmm.
Your liver is one of the reasons is that it's kind of buried underneath your ribs on the right side of the lower part of your ribs, and so it's hidden away there. And opposite on it on the left side is your stomach and your spleen. So it's over on the right side here. And of course, the next question often is, I hear about the liver, but what does the liver do? We all know that the
Exactly.
heart pumps
Yes.
blood. We know that the brain helps you think. What does the liver do? And the way I think it's best characterized is the liver is your big metabolism factory of your body.
Mm.
So the liver is what receives all of your nutrients. When you eat, you digest the food, it gets collected in these big veins that collect all the digested substances and bring it to the liver. And your liver then works on that food. It sorts it, and then it processes it to make the carbohydrates, the fats, the proteins, many of those substances that you need for the functions of your body. So it's a big metabolism factory.
Mm.
And so the other thing that liver is really important for is that as it metabolizes the things that you put in through your mouth and you eat, some of those things are potentially toxic to your body. And so one of the big functions of the liver is to take those toxins and make them less toxic so that they don't cause a severe injury to the body if they get in your bloodstream. So it'll identify toxic compounds. It'll usually add something to those compounds to try to make them less toxic, and then it tries to excrete them into something else that we don't hear a lot about is bile ducts. And
Mm.
so bile ducts are within your liver. It's like a tree of tubes. It goes from the very smallest liver cells all the way out. And what the bile does is that it actually helps you to digest your food because the bile ends up getting spilled out into your intestine. But in addition, those toxins that have been changed and made less toxic, the liver tries to excrete them in the bile so they go back out where they came from and go out of your body. So those are some of the functions of the liver.
Yes. So, before we get into my follow-up question, which is, well, how do we keep this vital organ running at the fullest, best capacity that we can? I just want to ask what affects the liver? How does, something that is so vital, uh, what affects the liver so bad that we get these different types of liver diseases? Dr. Furukawa, can you answer that for us?
Yeah, so thanks for that question. And I really like Dr. Roberts' explanation of the liver. And I think, you know, sometimes when it doesn't go well, that can also really help you understand just how vitally important the liver is. I mean, the heart just pumps stuff, the kidneys just filter stuff. The liver has like so many different things that it does.
Mm,
So if you don't have a functioning liver, you're not metabolizing all these like toxins that build up, you get a little loopy. You're not making all these proteins that your body needs, and so your like vessels get leaky. You get fluid in your belly and your legs and your lungs, and they don't make components that really help basic functions in your body, like clotting. And so you might actually have instances of bleedings or even clotting where you're not supposed to. So the liver is very complicated. But despite all that complication, not a lot of people understand kind of what are the things that really kind of could harm my liver. And
hmm
kind of there's really three big ones out there. So the first one is, I know the title of this talk is, it's not all about the alcohol,
Right.
but actually, that's still the number one
It's
cause
the,
of cirrhosis
yeah.
in the country. So I got to mention that, but a little more on that. But kind
Mhm.
of moving beyond the alcohol, viral hepatitis. You see this little thingy right here. That's so I work at CDC in our division of viral hepatitis, and viral hepatitises are a selection of about 5 different types of viruses that tend to infect the liver. The most common ones that you'd come across are hepatitis C and hepatitis B, and so those ones can infect and your body, go into your liver, and actually cause a lot of inflammation, cellular damage that ultimately leads to liver disease. And then the other big one is actually what we used to call non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. Although I think the new technical term is like metabolic dysfunction associated steatotic liver disease, which is not really helpful for the general
Mm,
person here in that. So just fatty liver. So it's essentially when you have maybe some extra weight, diabetes, a metabolic picture that then leads you to accumulate a lot of fat in your liver, and that causes inflammation and ultimate liver damage. So those are the top 3 categories. There's other smaller, rare ones. You can also have drug injury from either a medication or other substances you're using. But for by and large, the most part of like the public health burden of liver disease is from those top 3.
mm. Thank you for sharing that. Can you delve a little bit deeper? What is a fatty liver? What makes a liver fatty? When somebody, the regular everyday person, hears a fatty liver, they may think, okay, well, that has to do with something with my weight or what am I eating? So, what causes a fatty liver?
Dr. Roberts, have to jump into it.
Yeah.
You're the hepatologist. I think you get the right of first refusal.
Yes.
Yes, that sounds great. Yeah, so I think Dr. Furukawa sort of hinted at some of the things that are associated with a fatty liver.
hmm
So, for example, having diabetes, being overweight, and having some degree of obesity, having hypertension, all of those things are associated with what we tend to call this sort of metabolic dysfunction in your body, where it's like your body doesn't work quite right
hmm
because diabetes messes up with the way sugars are metabolized in your body. And so when that happens, sometimes the sugar gets converted into fat, and sometimes the fat is deposited in the wrong place, such as in the
Ah,
liver.
okay.
So all of a sudden you look at the liver cells and they actually have little spots of fat in them. And when the liver gets the fat in it, sometimes that fat, as it's broken down, you get breakdown products that stimulate inflammation in the liver.
Mm,
It causes the liver to get irritated, so that you get immune cells that come into the liver, cause this inflammatory process. Now, there's a couple of things that happen when you have inflammation. That inflammation can damage the liver cells themselves. You can have liver cells die from the inflammation. When liver cells die, of course, your body tries to repair that process. And so
Mhm.
it tries to cause what we call regeneration. And we say one of the strengths of the liver, one of its superpowers is this ability to regenerate itself.
Mm.
And we talked about toxins before. Toxins, of course, when they affect the liver, they might kill off some liver cells. The viral hepatitis or fat in the liver can destroy some of these liver cells. And so this ability for the liver to regenerate is key to sustaining our liver function. But imagine that you have fat in the liver and maybe increasing amounts of fat from diabetes that isn't well controlled, hypertension, high
Mm.
cholesterol. What tends to happen then is it's not like we caused an injury yesterday, we repaired it and we're fine. There's injury today, and tomorrow and the next day. So eventually the liver runs out of its capacity to regenerate itself.
Mm.
And when it runs out of the ability to regenerate itself in a normal way, the liver begins to be replaced by scar tissue. It's like you take your skin. If you get a clean cut to your skin, it'll heal. You'll think you never saw anything there. But if you kept cutting in the same place, eventually there'd be a scar you could see, and then
Mhm.
you get scar tissue forming in the liver as well. And of course, when the scar tissue replaces the liver tissue, the liver cells, then we lose the liver functions. And so critical that we do what we can to reduce that ongoing injury, because otherwise we end up with scar tissue replacing the liver and the propensity for failure of the liver.
Wow. Dr. Furukawa, are there some telltale signs that a person, if they may not have gotten tested, one, are there some signs that their liver may be failing or not operating at the highest capacity?
Yeah, so great question. And a lot of the things that we've been discussing, you will, if you're, for instance, continuing to drink alcohol, you're infected with viral hepatitis, or you're having buildup of fat in your liver, um, actually you might not notice anything
Hmm.
symptoms wise. It's not until sometimes a little later in the course because of, as Dr. Roberts really nicely described, like the liver is a really tough organ. Like it can take a beating,
Yeah.
and so it could be sometimes decades of exposure or damage that then starts to manifest. And so sometimes the earliest sign that you might notice is just some yellowing under your tongue. Maybe that progresses to yellowing of the eyes. You might notice some propensity to bleed, and sometimes it's not until maybe something very drastic happens that, oh, then maybe you start having some bleeding, like vomiting blood or
Hmm.
having dark stools. That might be a sign of internal gastrointestinal bleeding of in your gut. And so uh, it can be very subtle for a while and then all of a sudden manifest pretty dramatically. Uh, Kind of earlier in that phase, maybe you don't feel anything, it can be picked up by some laboratory tests. Commonly, these are called like liver function tests. And, specifically, there's some called like ALT or AST. And those can be elevated initially early on in the phase as kind of a clue for potential liver damage. If you're engaged in care, likely you'll be getting liver function testing as a part of just like your routine primary care. But a lot of people aren't engaged in care and might not have this like cue in that, hey, maybe I might be having some damage to my liver. And so a plug for getting plugged in. If you got a good doctor, great. If you don't got one, that's one of the kind of the really important relationships in your life to make sure you're kind of living your most healthy life.
Wow. Wow. So let me just back up a little bit. You said some symptoms may not show for even decades.
Yeah.
So I'm just talking for someone in our audience who may have maybe, let's say, in their 20s. They've, not necessarily abused alcohol, but used a lot of it during those times. Could that person be subject to possible liver damage later on in life?
Yes is the answer. The exposure that someone gets, it can always be very variable. Some people can drink a lot and then not progress to severe cirrhosis, while others, can have a period of intense drinking, but then no longer drinking, but still have had that early liver damage that then progresses. It's kind of different, and there's a lot of other things in life happening that might contribute to other causes of disease. So, I mentioned the top three. You can
Hmm.
have all three of them at once. And
Wow.
those folks will get much worse progression of liver disease compared to people just like with one of them. If yeah, we all had some fun college times or like when we're younger, and so
Hmm.
um, that that in itself might not necessarily be the thing like, oh my gosh, I might be having a failing liver. But nonetheless, I think probably in today's world where um, we live in a rather tough environment when it comes to healthy food, access to healthy foods, and ability to have activity. Probably a lot of just about all of us are at risk of that fatty liver disease, and so I
Mm.
think um, there's no standard recommendations for annual liver function tests, but I think if you're plugged into care, you're likely going to have a doctor who will know to kind of do some of these tests if they think you need it.
Great, great. And Dr. Roberts, so early on, we spoke a little bit about hepatitis A and C, A, B, and C. Sorry, but what are the differences, and what causes those?
Mhm. Yeah, it's a great question. And so these are all different viruses that we can get infections from. A commonly is an infection that we get from something that we ate. So we eat something that is infected by the virus, and the virus makes its way to the liver and can cause damage to the liver. A most of the time causes a self-limited infection because our body can often recognize that there's something wrong here. We have a virus that's here. It's in the wrong place. We make antibodies against it. A small proportion of people will get very severe liver disease, but many people, as they make this antibodies against the virus, will clear the infection,
Hmm.
and they are done with it. B and C, on the other hand, are also viruses, but they cause a more chronic infection. In that B, particularly, many people will acquire B as a young child or around the time of birth, and when that happens, the immune system thinks that, well, this is just part of the person's normal body. So the immune system initially doesn't recognize it as foreign. And so people can develop chronic viral hepatitis that way. And C is also one of these viruses that is really, really good at evading the immune system. So even though it's in your body, if the immune system makes an antibody, it changes itself. So now it looks different. And so it's difficult for the immune system to suppress that virus. And so B and C in particular tend to cause the chronic liver disease that we are concerned about.
And if I could
Wow.
add,
Yes,
just
please.
to your earlier point of like what can we do for testing and that sort of stuff, um, because hepatitis C and B are just so relatively prevalent and there's ready treatment for them, CDC actually has recommendations for everybody to get tested for hepatitis B and hepatitis C at least once in their life. And so
Okay.
that could be, you know, as a part of your routine doctor care for folks that may have risk factors, like for folks who may use some illicit substances, including injection drugs. You may have recommendations actually to test every year. But
Mm.
regardless of your risk factor, we've just noticed that um, it's just so prevalent. So for Hep C in particular, about 1 to 2% of the population will have it, and so if we go around trying to ask people for risk factors, that's just really clunky, and you miss people. And there's a lot of stigma that comes around with um, things that might lead you to get hepatitis C. So it's easier if we just say, actually, everyone should be tested at least once.
Okay. And there isn't a certain age that a person should be tested?
For hepatitis C, it's adults over 18. So
Okay.
I would suspect just about most of your audience members would fall into that category. So if you haven't been tested for Hep C, this is my public service announcement. Get your Hep B and Hep C test.
Yes. Yes. Okay. So that's great. So besides testing, how does, let's say a person is, going to the gym and they're physical all the time. So what can they do in order to, I mean, does that physical activity help in any way with the liver? Of course, it helps with muscles and maybe even heart disease, but does physical activity, being physically fit, help with preserving the liver? Dr. Roberts, what do you say?
Absolutely, and it goes back to what we were talking about metabolism, because what we know is that physical activity really improves your overall metabolism, your overall sense of well-being and health. And of course, the other piece of that, of course, is nutrition, is optimal nutrition. And Dr. Furukawa had talked about sometimes that it can be a challenge depending on where we live in, and sometimes we have what we call food deserts, where there's places where it's tough to get actually a nutritious, healthy meal. The CDC talks about having a colorful meal. The fruits and vegetables, making sure you're getting enough of that, getting your vitamins in. And sometimes in places, we have food that is very dense, lots of calories, lots of fat, lots of sugar, not so much of the other healthy nutrients, the protein, vegetables. And so I think those are key elements of lifestyle factors that we can follow that really help our liver.
Good, good.
If I could follow up with that,
Yes, please.
totally agree. And I want to emphasize. So exercise, totally agree that just for your metabolic health is just really important. But I do want to say just if it's just exercise alone, especially for folks that have fatty liver buildup, that's not going to be enough because if you don't address this diet picture, you're kind of uh, taking care of it. It's just like addressing a side issue while ignoring the main issue, the main
Mm,
driver. And so I think it's really we got to kind of be real with you, like the environment and the kind of market structures that are in place. I mean, the amount of just ultra processed, high sugar, high fat, preservative foods that are being thrown at you. We have record rates of childhood obesity. We have people who have these like eating disorders who just like
mm,
must eat. It is compulsion to eat really heavy sugared foods, and that is honestly the biggest driver. And I think it's worth bearing that these don't happen kind of within like by accident, by random chance. Like, there's a very clear distribution of disparities of why are there higher rates of morbidity and cirrhosis among communities that don't have access to as many resources. So there's a whole kind of underpinning here of I'll say it, structural racism and disparities in opportunities in the economic opportunities that kids have access to, the educational opportunities, the environments that they're growing up in that have fewer jobs and options for activity and healthy foods. And so there is kind of underpinning this all that kind of larger policy piece that kind of drives a lot of these disparities in health, including liver disease, including hepatitis. So
mhm.
I think we can't like not mention that with this group, and just to know that in some senses, like the odds are kind of stacked against you, and you have to, in some cases, work a lot harder than someone who might have the resources to, just walk down the street to get some blueberries. And whereas that might be not possible where you live, and you have to really kind of be very intentional, seek that out in ways that takes a lot of effort. And it's a
Mhm.
really busy world out there, but this sort of stuff is important for your health.
Yes, yes. I'm so glad you shared that. Dr. Roberts, this panel today is a part of the Men's Health Summit. So we're talking about men, Black men specifically. Is there something that Black men can do in order to combat liver disease besides the thing that you said? Is there, or is it the same between men and women when it comes to liver disease?
That's a great question. I think it's particularly important for men because it's interesting. Most severe forms of liver disease tend to affect men more than women. And so in general, for example, we tend to see when we think about liver cancer rates in men are usually twice or 3 or 4 times the rates in men than they are in women.
Wow.
There seems to be some evidence that suggests that this is in part actually due to the fact that women have estrogens, which are actually protective in the sense that they tend to reduce how much inflammation you get in your liver. And men, because we have less estrogen, tend to be more prone to have inflammation and the damage within the liver. It's possible also that men are more likely to engage in the behaviors that are associated with, acquiring a viral infection or acquiring fatty liver disease. So this is key. And when we think about cancers broadly, for example, what we find is that in many places, when we think about cancers, we find that liver cancer is, it's the number 2 or 3 or 4 cancer in men, whereas in women, it might be number 5 or 6 or 8. And so liver cancer is more important also for men. And so it's really important that I think men are aware that they take Dr. Furukawa's advice when they go to get a checkup, that they actually ask their doctor, I hear the CDC is recommending that we should be tested for hepatitis B and hepatitis C. I don't remember that I was ever tested. Can we test me to see if I might have these infections? It might be a good thing to have a conversation with their physician about the amount of alcohol they use and say, well, I use some alcohol. Do you have recommendations? Should I be thinking about reducing the amount of alcohol that I use? And of course, the other risk factors we talked about, the diabetes and hypertension and high cholesterol, are all factors that contribute to liver disease. So these are all things that men can be aware of and can be trying to make change in their lives to make a difference. I'll particularly say hepatitis B, if you fall within the group of people that should be treated, there's very effective treatment that suppresses the level of the virus to almost undetectable levels in your body. For hepatitis C, there's actually relatively short-term treatment, 8 or 12 weeks of treatment that will cure the virus.
Wow.
Actually. So those are some of the most cost-effective things you can do in medicine right now that can reduce your risk. And if it turns out that you don't currently, for example, have hepatitis B, there's vaccination that you can take to actually prevent you acquiring it in the future. So that's another sort of element of the prevention of these diseases.
That is awesome. I'm so glad you shared that. Just because, I'm about to say a word that's not very popular in the medical community, but one of our users asks, can liver disease be reversed? Meaning, okay, my liver is only functioning at a certain percentage level. Can I do something personally, on my own in order to reverse that? What do you say, Dr. Furukawa?
Like I mentioned, the liver has some amazing regenerative capacity. So especially if you're early on, if we're catching you kind of, in your 20s, in your 30s, 40s still, kind of before kind of you have some of decades of injury. Absolutely. It's one of those things, like I mentioned before, like if you stop the heavy drinking, you treat your hepatitis, you keep a healthy lifestyle and exercise and good diet, then actually, if you've had this damage, a lot of it can actually reverse. I think for the Hep C
Hmm.
one in particular, we have a lot of data that shows just folks that had some pretty, were on the pathway to getting cirrhosis, and you treat them with these medications, you cure them of hepatitis C, and then you actually start to see improvements in the amount of scarring there is in the liver, and it's just absolutely fantastic. There is kind of a danger zone though when if you get to the stage where your liver is repairing itself, it's getting damaged, repairing, and if it kind of tips over into this area where there's just so much damage that it can't repair back to 100% or at like a high enough level to have the function that you used to have, you can reach this point where you've done so much damage that you can't reverse it, and in fact, even if you stop, there's going to be slow progression of that disease. So the real goal of prevention is to like, let's find you, let's help you out, help you have a healthy liver before you get to that point, through public health, through conversations like this.
Yes, yes. Awesome, awesome. Okay, I've got a question that was text to me from a family member. And Dr. Roberts, they were wondering when it comes to alcohol, even though the title of this is not all about the alcohol, but we know that that is one of the leading factors. Is there a kind of alcohol that is more prevalent in causing liver disease? Like, let's say, I don't know, is it, something as simple as wine can cause it, or is it, the harder liquors? I don't know. So I'm asking you.
Great question. I think the way the evidence suggests that it's not so much the type of alcohol as the amount of, and if you think about it, the amount of, let's say, pure alcohol that you're ingesting, that your liver is exposed to.
Okay.
So, to get a certain amount of pure alcohol, you may take different amounts of, so for example, if your beer has 5% alcohol, that's different from taking a liquor that has maybe 30 or 40%
Yes.
alcohol in it. But once you distill it down to that core amount of alcohol, and we say, you're taking 10 grams of alcohol, then whether you're getting the 10 grams from beer or from wine or from, a vodka, doesn't really seem to make that much of a difference to your liver. And you'll tend to see, of course, that when people drink beer, they may drink lots more to get that sensation of alcohol than someone who's drinking shots, for example. But either person can drink enough alcohol to cause damage to the liver.
Yes. Thank
Yeah.
you.
And
Thank you.
I'll add that,
Yes.
sometimes it's not necessarily the amount, although that definitely has something to do with it. It's kind of as well as some of the behavior and the nature that you're consuming alcohol. So actually, I just like ask your audience. So I'm going to ask you 4 questions and tell me how many, like, think about how many of these am I answering yes to? So the first question is, have you ever felt you should cut down on your drinking? The second one is, have you ever annoyed or have people annoyed you by criticizing your drinking? The third one is, have you ever felt bad or guilty about your drinking? And then the fourth is, have you ever had a drink first thing in the morning to steady your nerves to get rid of a hangover? So if you're answering yes to 2 of those, that's actually a pretty solid sign that actually you have what we call excessive drinking, and so that's almost like that's the sort of threshold to be like, okay, maybe this is a little too much, and certainly if you're answering yes to 2 or more of those questions, I think you should get your liver checked out. I would definitely, if you haven't already.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, Dr. Roberts and Dr. Furukawa, you two are definitely well versed in this area. I would love, love, love to know before we sign off, what advancements or what work are you doing in your institution in order to combat, liver disease, and what sort of things are we excited about coming into the future? I'll start with you, Dr. Roberts. What's going on at Mayo Clinic?
Yes, well, I think it starts and should start really with the basics.
Mhm.
And I think doing the things that we need to prevent liver disease. We talked about vaccinations, making sure that children, when they're born, are vaccinated against hepatitis B, for example, is critical. And a lot of the work that we're doing actually is working with communities and doing research in partnership with communities so that communities can recognize when there's viral hepatitis of one kind or the other that's prevalent in the community, so that we can work together to address and reduce these risks and prevent liver disease getting to the stage where, for example, there's more severe liver disease or liver cancer. It's a lot of work that we are doing. Once we know people have cirrhosis of the liver or scar tissue of the liver, they are at risk for liver cancer. A lot of work that we're doing in trying to develop tests for early detection of cancer. Because again, if we can find cancers early, we can treat them that much more effectively.
Yes.
So
Yes.
we're doing quite a bit of work in that space, trying to develop simpler tests that people can go in and get that improve the detection of early stage liver cancer. And then for people who have more advanced stages of liver cancer, we are doing different kinds of studies. There's a lot of work being done in the whole area of what we call immunotherapy. And this is the idea. It's a little bit like Star Wars. You watch a Star Wars episodes and talk about Starship. We talk about the fact that the starships throw up these shields to prevent damage from incoming missiles and other things. So that's what cancer cells do. They throw up shields that prevents the immune system attacking them. And over the last few decades, we've learned what some of those shields are, and we've learned to develop antibodies that dissolve those shields. So we make these cancer cells more accessible to the immune system, more prone to attack.
Wow.
So we're developing, tools and systems where we can combine different treatments so that we can break away some of the ways that cancers resist treatment and make the treatments more effective.
Well, thank you. Thank you for all the work that you're doing. That sounds incredible. Dr. Furukawa, what's happening at the CDC when it comes to viral hepatitis and just liver disease in general?
Yeah, I'd say, it's a very opportune time for us to be having this conversation. In fact, that there's a lot of developments, particularly on the Hep C front. So, um, we've just been working at the federal level, really trying to lay the foundation for what we hope is a national hepatitis C elimination initiative. And because, Hep C, as Dr. Roberts has mentioned, has historically been a really leading cause of liver injury and cirrhosis. But we have these treatments that came out in 2014 that are breakthroughs. They essentially allow you to take some oral medications for 8 to 12 weeks, completely cure your Hep C, um, and in some cases, just will prevent liver cancer, cirrhosis, liver deaths. And so we actually know now that it's super efficacious to treat it. And there's like three wins here. One, obviously, as the patient, yeah, you're feeling a lot better. You're not going to die from hepatitis C related cirrhosis. Two, there's like a public health thing. So if there's less people with hepatitis C out there, there's less ability for it to be transmitted to new people. And then the actual third one, which has only more recently been discovered, is just it's actually cost saving. So you treat someone today, they're not going to have all these massive health complications that chew up millions of dollars, leads to transplants. And so it's almost like a no-brainer. Gosh, we should be curing everyone of hepatitis C in this country. And so at the federal level, there's a plan proposed to scale up the resources available for hepatitis C elimination. And as a part of that, too, there's new investments in diagnostics, treatments. And just today, a couple hours ago, the FDA announced that there is a new point of care test for the virus that causes hepatitis C. And so that's going to allow us to bring testing to where people are at, as opposed to having them come to the doctors. And a lot of folks might not even be engaged in care, but where are we going to be able to reach them? Can we reach them, um, you know, at like street fairs? Can we do street outreach? Can we go to jails and prisons? Can we go to substance use treatment centers? So there's a lot of great ways that I think we're going to make some wonderful progress on Hep C in this country.
Awesome. Awesome. Just from hearing you too, I don't know, maybe I'm a little bit more optimistic, but am I hearing that we will see the elimination of liver disease in our lifetime? Do you believe that's possible? Dr. Roberts, what do you think?
I believe it's possible. I think we have a lot of the tools. We have work to do, but I think we need to get in there and do it.
Yes, yes. Dr. Furukawa, what do you think?
I think it'll be hard. I would say, alcohol ain't going away. It's been around.
No, it's not.
Oldest substance. We see ancient Egyptians using it. So I think that that'll be with us.
But with
difficulty,
with the
but
things
I
that
think
you all have said
with viral
tonight,
hepatitis, I
yes.
think, actually this is kind of one of those things where, all right, here's actually something really easy. And already we've seen the causes of people having cirrhosis needing a transplant. It used to be Hep C by and far. And now actually that's fallen to much lower. And nowadays, in some places like the Veterans Administration, where they've really been intentional about treating their veterans with Hep C and curing them, that's kind of rare. I'm a provider at the VA in Atlanta, and I rarely see people with hepatitis C cirrhosis, and it's amazing. And
Wow.
I'd love to see that in our lifetime. And I think we can get there in the next 5 years.
Okay. Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for such a lively, educational platform tonight. So thank you, Dr. Roberts and Dr. Furukawa, for not only for your expertise, but for the work that you're doing behind the scenes in order to make our communities healthier. Thank you guys so much for joining us, blackdoctor.org, at our Men's Health Summit today. Want to wish you guys a great rest of Men's Health Month. We've only got a couple of days left. And thank you guys for joining. All right. God bless. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mhm.